Michael Lindsay from Vital MX. We're out here at Kahia Creek today, spending the day testing the 2019 KTM 450 SXF. Realistically, the 2019 KTM 450 is more like a finalized production version of the factory edition that we saw earlier this year, which we got to test in depth, where I really went over the differences between the longitude and torsional stiffness in the frame, how that affects it on the track, along with the changes to the cylinder head and anything else technically throughout the bike, like the bodywork. So if you want more of that technical breakdown, I really recommend that you backtrack and watch our factory edition test video, because for today, we're really going to talk more about how this bike feels different on the track compared to about any other 450 in the class. Starting out with the engine characteristic, the last couple weeks we've really been riding a range of 450s as we're in that testing season, and the KTM stands out for how easy it is to ride. It has a much more linear, just smoother power than anything else out there. A lot of 450s were used to that heavy bark right at the initial crisp and crack of the throttle. Now don't get me wrong, the KTM is very crisp and responsive, but it just doesn't yank your arms out right off that initial hit. It tends to build more as it starts to build up this horsepower and torque figures that are pretty impressive, but more through that mid to top end range. So the difference is you don't just come out of a corner with this bike, square up and grab a handful and expect it to come out with just this absolute fire-breathing power. It's meant more to roll through the corner. So in one aspect, it's really easy to ride, and in the other way, it's really easy to teach you to ride aggressive. I feel like, this not this deep of a comparison, but it's a little more like riding a 125 versus anything else, just how much you carry and flow your momentum. This 450 does have plenty of power, but it just makes it such an easy power to roll through the corners. It never really catches you off guard as you kind of roll into the middle and start to accelerate. It puts down the power so efficiently, it allows you to ride it much more aggressively. And during this time, you're not catching yourself getting back out of the throttle, making adjustments. So it allows you to really focus forward on the track and think about that next objective, that next section, and how you're going to get the bike into it. Suspension-wise, there isn't much to complain about in that range. It's very well balanced. They have been tweaking on the fork setting a little bit from the FE. Some of the seals have changed, and it just feels a little bit plusher. Surprisingly, at my weight, I'm a little bit over my normal right now. I'm low 160s. We stayed pretty standard. I tried a little bit less and more on compression. The track we were riding today doesn't have much in the way of landing, so we're having a lot of slap down. So I stayed very standard on compression. On a lot of other tracks, I would maybe just take 2 clicks out. We're on a standard air pressure. The only other thing I could find usable is maybe a little bit quicker rebound on some of your deeper downhills. It was so plush. It was working through the initial into the middle part of the stroke a little too quick. Just like 1 or 2 clicks quicker on rebound just to get it to recover a little bit was really good, because the initial on the AER air fork they have now is just become really prime. Overall ergonomics of the bike is great. We talk about it every year. Great Brembo brakes, the hydraulic clutch, just the overall fin finish. The new bodywork is definitely a huge carryover from that factory edition, just the ability to get around on it. The power, like I said, is so usable. It's a 450 that can be ridden way more like a 250F, and that's not just the power band, it's the suspension, it's the balance of the bike, and ultimately the bodywork on how easy it is to get around. You don't ever really feel like you're trapped in the middle of the bike. It's super easy to get to the front on and off the back as much as you want, which is pretty rare with a 450. Usually the big exhaust, big side plates, you feel a lot of bulk as you get back, but this bike's really comfortable to slide back on. Electronic-wise, the bike has a few options. It has its traction control, which for me wasn't really necessary. As smooth as the power already is, I only find it really necessary if it's super wet out or really, really hard packed, because it's just such an easy bike to already control. Map-wise, map 1 is standard, 2 is aggressive. The only real change I noticed when we go to map 2 is it doesn't really bark to life any harder. It more or less just pulls quicker through the range. The standard bike takes a long time to get through every gear in that standard map. Map 2 just allows you to kind of get through the shifting points quicker. The bike already makes a ton of power up top, and it really is an easy bike to just ride section to section without thinking about those shifts, because it makes so much more high-end horsepower than really anything it's up against. Overall, compared to a lot of other bikes as they come out, the KTM just feels like a really complete package. There's so much feel, so much feedback to the rider. It carves in so easy. It's so light. It's really noticeable. The rougher the track gets, the weight really comes into play. The power is so easy to ride. It just feels like the whole bike was built with everything in mind thought together. And this really plays into why the bike has done so well in shootouts. I think it's got a fantastic shot at him this year. But overall, if you're just looking at this bike individually, where I really think it comes into play is if you think most of the 450s out there are just too much. If they're point shoot bikes, if they're wearing you out, but you don't want a slow bike, but you want a fast 450, the KTM's really something you should think about. It's just such an easy bike to ride, but you still have so much power when you really need it.